Previously, on day one of our El Camino trip, we set out from Ajo and covered the first 35 miles of the rugged and historic road. We passed through Organ Pipe National Monument and Bates Well before continuing into the Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge. Without any major issues, we called it a day and made camp in the Choya Hills. Today, we continue our journey as we continue to head west towards Yuma. We'll pass through the intense Pinta Sands, the rugged Pinacate Lava Flow, and more historic and desolate terrain before ending up in the Barry Goldwater bombing range. The next morning, I was awakened by what felt like a furnace. Even though it was still before 7 a.m., the sun beating down through the tent was uncomfortably warm. I stumbled out of the tent and was pleasantly surprised by the view. Mountain ranges off in the distance were peeking out from the vast expanse of saguaros. After hiking around and checking out the surrounding area, I saw our first Border Patrol vehicle in 12 hours. He waved and continued on his way, probably thinking, who the hell is crazy enough to camp out here in the summer? Luckily, yesterday's high was only 85, and the next 2 days were forecast to be less than 95. Not bad for the end of May. After Daniel woke up, we got some breakfast going. Again, we were just happy to be able to actually warm up some food on the stove. We feasted on bacon, sausage, and eggs.
All of a sudden, we had some company. A coyote was slowly moving just north of our camp, probably attracted by the smell of the bacon. He continued on his way. We were surprised to see him. After relaxing for a while, the silence was broken by the sound of an engine. Not surprisingly, it was Border Patrol again. But this time they stopped to talk with us. The agents made sure we had the number to call in case we came across trouble, although the lack of reception wouldn't have made that difficult. They told us they had passed us the night before just before camp and asked how our trip was going. They told us to reference their specific unit, Charlie 120 and Charlie 61, if we came across any trouble, and they would, quote-unquote, get their asses over to help us out. We felt significantly more at ease knowing these badasses were out there watching our back. Shortly after they took off, we began to break down camp and play Tetris, trying to get everything back in the Jeep. We were loaded up and on the trail just before 10 a.m.
We ready? Day 2. El Camino, let's go. Don't think there's gonna be traffic here. We hit the trail and again set our sights west. 5 miles later, we came across Papago Well. Here, we found not only another emergency beacon, but also a large water tank and windmill. The tank had a spigot on it and was full of water, should we or anyone else need it. Another reassuring sign, even though we had packed 13 gallons of water. 3 miles west of Papago, we came across the second Border Patrol FOB. This one was larger and more active than the one we had seen the day before. Just past the outpost, we pulled off to the side and watched a Border Patrol Jeep drive towards us towing a bizarre trailer-type thing. As it got closer, it became clear what they were doing. Dragging behind the Jeep was 7 tires, arranged in a sort of Olympic ring design. This method is used to drag the trail to create a fresh surface to keep an eye on footprints that may cross the road. We talked to the agent driving the Jeep and another one that passed by shortly after and told them our plans for the day. They were quite surprised to see us out there, and even more surprised to know that we'd be spending the night 50 miles down the trail.
Pressing on, the trail continues west and climbs through another cluster of hills. It was here where we missed Dave O'Neill's gravesite. Rumor has it that O'Neill was on El Camino and somehow ended up face down in a small puddle of water, making him the only known person along the trail who died from too much water. Not too bummed about missing it and not looking to join him, we kept going west. After about 5 more miles down the trail, we hit another terrain change, this time extremely deep and fine sand. Shifting into 4-wheel drive, we had to keep the RPMs higher to keep moving through the sand. Looking back, I was happy to see a wall of dust behind me. We were turning gasoline into dust, and it was awesome. We were now in the Pinta Sands for the next few miles as we passed Las Playas, an ephemeral lake to the south, which marked the low point on the trail. This is not somewhere you want to be on the extraordinarily off chance it rains. The powder becomes quicksand after adding water, making it absolutely impassable. The Jeep bounced around as we picked our line through the washes and navigated the tightest sections of the trail so far.
After a couple miles, the sand vanished and was replaced by the black and sharp rocks of the Pinacate Lava Flow. For the next 8 miles, we would be traversing over the jagged lava rocks that flowed north from cinder cones in Mexico. In order to avoid a flat tire, our pace was slowed. Despite airing down, we were still bounced around inside the Jeep. On the west side of the flow, we stopped to take in the view. El Camino drops off the edge of the flow and continues west across another large valley. It was at this point where an untrained eye could look south and see the border. It was less than a mile from our position, and we had still not seen one sign of illegal activity. However, it was now noon and the heat of the day was beginning to wear on us. At this point, we were halfway done for the day, but still had 25 miles to go. So far, the Jeep was doing great. As we dropped off the flow, we had to stay in 4-wheel drive as we entered round 2 of the Pinta Sands. The trail is heavily eroded along this section, but the ride was fairly smooth. After several tight turns in the wash bottom, we finally emerged back on hard-packed dirt a couple of miles later. Shifting back into 2-wheel drive, the Jeep, which was now running quite warm from the deep sand, was able to catch a breather.
Within a few windy miles, we were in the heart of the Tule Mountain. Here, it is easy to see how little rain this area receives based on how little the mountains are eroded. The desert floor runs right up to the base of the mountain, which juts nearly straight up into the sky. It felt like we were driving on another planet. 13 miles after the Pinacate Lava Flow, we arrived at Tule Well. Here, picnic tables, a windmill, a water tank, and a small building await. We figured this would be a great spot for lunch. After hiking up to see a small monument built by the Boy Scouts in 1930, we headed inside of the abandoned building to have lunch in the shade.
It was just before 3 in the afternoon when we were back on the trail. Shortly after leaving Tule Well, we passed south of Tule Tank, an optional hiking spot where early travelers on the trail may have been able to find water in the natural tanks after a good rain. We opted to continue moving. The trail continued to wind through the extremely rugged mountains with unique rock formations on both sides. 6 miles later, we pulled off to the south to try and find another gravesite. After parking the Jeep, we got out on foot to look. We were looking for Circle 8 gravesite, the site where a family of 8 was massacred when traveling on El Camino in 1880. Unfortunately, due to some bad GPS coordinates, we never found the grave, which turns out we were less than 500 feet from. We did find some old track marks on the desert floor, which could have been left by those traveling the trail a couple hundred years ago. Heading back to the main trail, we got a nice look at Tordillo Mountain, a geologically unique mountain that has a granite base topped with a volcanic cap. Back on the highway, we crossed into the Buried Goldwater bombing range 5 miles later. Here, a small sign signified the danger and reminded us not to pick up any ordnance that we might find on the trail. Before the trip, we had to log our visit via a website, which is also available over the phone, to let officials know when and where we'd be on the trail.
Facing this way and we have to go that way.
It was now 4 p.m. and we were getting anxious about getting to our second night's camp. We took a quick little break, read the signs, kicked up some dust, and continued on. We continued west towards the Tinajas Altas Mountains, which were now in sight. The road got significantly better after leaving Cabeza Prieta, and we were able to hit our new top speed for the day, 45 miles an hour. Some washboardy trail shortly down the road forced us to slow up. It was here where we flagged down a border patrol vehicle. Agents at the outpost 45 miles back had told us to inform agents on this side of the range where we'd be staying the night, that way they could check up on us. 5 miles later, we pulled off El Camino at the turnoff for Tinajas Altas, Spanish for high tanks. We proceeded south 1 mile along the eastern edge of the mountains. The scenery was fantastic, and when we had arrived at camp, we were quite pleased with our choice to stay the night here. Surrounded by rugged mountains on 3 sides, we had another great view of both the Tinajas Altas Mountains and the surrounding Lechuguilla Desert. With some daylight left, we decided to practice with our guns a bit and did some target shooting. After sending a bit of lead downrange, we set up camp. Shortly before sunset, we got a fire going and began to cook. Tonight's dinner, chili, Dutch oven cornbread, and some roasted kielbasa as an appetizer. Because we apparently suck at Dutch ovening, we ended up having just chili, kielbasa, and some more Mexican beer.
The sunset brought about a shroud of darkness and sweet relief from the heat. Once again, the night sky came out in full force. We had a good night talking around the fire, and just before going to bed, saw lights approaching. It was just after 11:30 when a border patrol truck rolled into our camp. We chatted with the agent. He had been sitting at the junction 1 mile back up the road and had seen lights. Making sure he wasn't crazy, he was certainly a little bewildered, although probably relieved to find us. He left and we had turned in for the night. Today had been really long. We had covered nearly 60 miles of the trail today. The heat and the constantly bumpy ride made our air mattresses a much welcome relief.
Next time, we conclude our epic 3-day, 130-mile off-road trip as we finish up El Camino del Diablo. We'll venture north through the Buried Goldwater bombing range and along the roughest part of the trail to the historic Fortuna mine before making it back to pavement.